In this lesson, we'll work with radio buttons and radio groups. Radio buttons provide a way for the user to choose a single item out of a list of options. They can only choose one in a group, so using them is a good way to limit choices where appropriate. We'll start by adding a couple of radio buttons to our layout. Then we'll also put in a text view because we're going to monitor some stuff later. And we will set the text property. Call this one radio button 1. And this radio button 2. We'll also set the checked property. And that will activate this radio button. Now you would expect that if I check the first radio button, that the second one will go off. Okay. Well, let's run this, and I'm sure that at runtime it'll square that away. I guess not. And when we click, we can't turn them off. This is awkward. So, in Android, radio buttons can only be clicked on by the user. They can't be clicked off. And the radio buttons must be in a radio group to know anything about each other to turn another button off when one has been turned on. So let's go back to that layout and try to get that thing right. So we'll first delete the radio buttons we have because they're basically no good to us. And we'll drag in a radio group. Now a radio group is already pre-populated with buttons, but no worries about that because these are actually individual radio button controls. If we go to the XML, we can see that the radio group is just a container that contains more radio buttons. So let's go back to the layout, and you can see that it also came automatically with the first button checked. So I'm going to check the second button just to make sure that actually the rest go off. And you can see that the first button did in fact go off when the second button was checked. Now I'm also going to set something called a tag property. And a tag property I can use to provide any kind of information associated with a control. So in this case, I'm actually going to do it on the first button, and I'm going to give it the number 1. The second button will be number 2, and the third button will be number 3. You might have seen the checked property bounce around between 1 and 2 when I did that. I can't tell you what that is. It's just kind of a designer fluke. So, let's go to the code and work with these a little bit. So I'm going to create a radio group variable, and I'm going to handle its checked changed event. And in that event, I'm going to get the radio button that was checked. I can get the ID of the checked radio button by looking at the checked ID off of the events arguments. And then I'll get the text view, and I'll set its text to the tag property of the radio button. And here's our radio buttons, and when I check the first one, you see the tag property is reflected in the text view. So the tag property is an object I can put pretty much anything I want to in it. That makes it pretty useful. So there's some ideas about how to use radio buttons.